My sister replaced me with her yoga instructor on a family trip funded by my trust. At the boarding dock, she handed the guest list to the crew. My name was crossed out. Her friends was scribbled in. When I asked why, she laughed in my face. Instructor gets my energy, you don't. Then she leaned in, lowered her sunglasses, and whispered, "You don't belong on this trip." I turned to my parents. My mom checked her phone. My dad gave a half shrug and said, "Let's not start drama." I stood there, holding my ticket, holding my suitcase, while the others stepped around me like I was luggage left behind. My name was erased. My place stolen. And no one cared enough to ask why. That should have been it. Me humiliated, excluded, forgotten again. But then the crew flipped the manifest, checked a different list, and the head purser turned to me and said, "Ma'am, welcome aboard. You're the owner." And just like that, every face that looked through me now had to look up at me. My name is Zinnia, and I built the life they all wanted to take credit for. They didn't just try to push me off the trip, they tried to erase my name from the legacy I created. If you've ever been cut out of something you built with your own hands, if you've ever been told you don't belong, then I hope this story makes you feel seen. Before I begin, let me know you're here with me. Drop a simple listening in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. It means more than you think, especially when silence is what hurt the most. And if my story resonates, hit that subscribe button. I share stories like this for people who've been left off the list, but built the whole damn table. Thank you. Now let me tell you everything. The morning light streamed softly through the gauzy white curtains of my kitchen window, tinting the old tiles a muted gold. I stood barefoot on the cool wooden floor, holding my favorite coffee mug chipped at the rim, but still intact, still mine. I'd molded it myself back when I had time for pottery. Celeste had once sneered at it, saying it looked like something scavenged from a garage sale. That didn't stop me from using it every day. I took a long sip of the coffee, letting the bitterness linger on my tongue. This house, my house, was quiet. Built in the 1880s, nestled in Charleston's historic district, it had weathered hurricanes, termites, and now the hawthorns. I had bought it with the earnings from my bridal design business, a brand I had built from scratch, thread by thread, seam by seam. My phone buzzed on the counter, a flash of white against the mahogany. I picked it up, half expecting another client message, but it was Instagram. Maya Elliott's niece had posted a boomerang champagne flutes clinking under string lights. The caption read, "Hawthorne family setting sail." I blinked. Sailed where my thumb hovered. I tapped through the tags. Everyone was there. Eleanor Elliott's mother holding court. Jasper with his usual smug grin. Celeste, of course, in a white linen dress, arm around Harper, the yoga instructor who somehow always appeared at our family functions, despite not being family. But me, I wasn't tagged. My name wasn't there at all. And then I saw it. A wide group shot on the dock. Harper stood where I should have been, right next to Elliot. The invite I never received suddenly took form in the shape of my absence. I sat down slowly, still staring at the screen. My mind flicked through past exclusions like a cruel slideshow. Eleanor's birthday brunch, where I was forgotten on the group email. The family Christmas card, where my shoulder was visibly cropped out. The charity gala, where I was seated next to the kitchen door while Celeste toasted guests from the head table in a gown I had designed, and she had claimed credit for. Each moment felt small at the time, easily dismissed. Now they stitched into a pattern I could no longer ignore. I tossed my phone onto the table and stared out the window at the stillness of the garden. A text pinged. Celeste. "Hey love, so sorry, boat filled up so fast. Thought Elliot told you." My blood ran cold. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my inbox and searched the email confirmation from the yacht charter. My fingers hovered as I clicked. The email, dated 3 days ago, stated clearly that my reservation had been canceled by Celeste Hawthorne and reassigned to Harper Ruiz. A second later, another message appeared, clearly not meant for me. "Yen tum kota humlin tauduk do. Emda la sung." It was from Maris Celeste's former assistant, the accidental recipient me. I stared at the screen for a long time before whispering, so it was never an oversight. It was a decision, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled down the red leather file box from the top shelf in my office, the one labeled Hawthorne Assets, and placed it on the table like a piece of evidence in court. The name of the yacht, the Halcyon Star, was embossed on the first page of the contract. I flipped through the pages, remembering each dollar that had gone into it. Every dress, every custom veil, every bridal show in sweaty ballrooms. I had funded the entire purchase. Elliot's name appeared on the deed only for tax purposes, something we'd both agreed to at the time. It had felt romantic then. Now it felt like betrayal waiting for activation. Celeste had always called the yacht our family's symbol of legacy. What legacy? The Halcyon Star was mine. I had paid for it with ambition, exhaustion, and discipline, not inheritance or connections. And yet somehow I'd been erased from the narrative again. I kept digging, trying to determine if I was overreacting or finally seeing the rot. Then I found an old voice memo backed up on my iCloud account. It was a recording from a year ago, a conversation between Celeste and the family lawyer Henry. "She's not blood," Celeste had said plainly. "Her name shouldn't be tied to family property." Henry hesitated before saying, "It's not ideal, but if Elliot signed, it's legal." I stopped the recording and stared at the waveform. Proof. Not of a mistake, but of intent. Just then, another message popped up, this one from Maris again. Apparently, she hadn't realized the previous message had gone to the wrong person. "Don't worry, she's not invited," Celeste said. "Remove her name from the start." I leaned back in my chair, hands trembling. My throat was dry, but my resolve was sharper than it had been in weeks. I printed the yacht contract, the payment confirmation, the email canceling my spot, and the voice memo transcript. I stacked everything into a black folder and labeled it in red ink, "Ownership Evidence." I carried it into the living room and placed it on the table. Then I turned to Elliot, who had just walked in from a run, oblivious to the storm waiting inside our walls. "We need to talk," I said. He wiped his forehead and froze. "About what?" "You know about the yacht. About Celeste canceling my seat. About the fact that Harper's taking my place." He blinked. "Babe, that's probably just a mix-up. Let me talk to Celeste." "No." I opened the folder and slid the cancellation email across the table. "She requested to remove my name 3 days ago." His face fell. "It has to be a mistake. You're reading too much into it." I waited. He offered nothing else. Not an apology, not outrage. Just the same tired shrug I'd seen him give at every family slight, every moment I'd been diminished. When I asked for the confirmation email of the original booking, he said he'd have to check. When I asked if he believed me, he said, "Don't make this into a fight. You always get so sensitive about these things." In that moment, I realized it wasn't just Celeste. It was Elliot too. He didn't see it as betrayal. He saw it as maintenance, keeping peace in a system that only worked because people like me stayed silent. But I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. That folder wouldn't just be documentation, it would be my entrance ticket. And this time I was going to take my seat whether they liked it or not. I didn't pack a sun hat or sandals. No swimsuit. No beachy novel to read on deck. Just a single matte black suitcase tucked precisely with copies of contracts, ownership documents, and the transcript of that voice memo I had listened to on repeat, like a mantra. The rest of the packing was mental resolving to show up not as a guest, but as a woman returning to claim something that should never have been taken. I called for a car to take me to the port at Charleston. I didn't bother asking Elliot if he wanted to ride together. He hadn't earned the seat beside me. I dressed carefully, deliberately. A navy silk sheath, sharp in cut and clean in intent. I had designed it 3 years ago and never released it commercially. It hugged at the right places, moved like water when I walked, and it had no embellishments, no lace, no embroidery, no distractions. It wasn't made to be admired. It was made to say, "I belong here." Say otherwise, and I will prove you wrong. The driver, a white-haired gentleman who looked like he'd been ferrying Charleston's elite around for decades, struck up small talk as we crossed the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge. His name was Vernon. When I confirmed the port and ship name, his eyes lit up. The Halcyon Star. That's the Hawthorne family yacht, right? I drove Miss Celeste once lovely gala evening. She told everyone the boat was a generational gift, part of the family legacy. She said her sister-in-law helped with the paperwork but wasn't involved. Said she was just a stand-in signature. He chuckled at his own memory. I thought she meant you were one of the staff. Didn't realize you were actually related. My hand tightened around the handle of my purse. I'm not, I said quietly. Not by blood. He must have sensed the drop in temperature because he cleared his throat and switched the subject to Charleston's summer humidity. But I wasn't listening anymore. My ears rang. I stared out the window and watched the boats on the water shift with the tide. One of them was mine, whether they liked it or not. My mind drifted first to the swan bloom dress Celeste had posted 2 years ago, calling it a tribute to her mother-in-law's elegance. It had actually been based on a pencil sketch I made from a photo of my own mother taken on a beach in Savannah the year before she passed. Celeste had lifted it from my concept board, added pearl buttons and paraded it as her idea. Then there was the charity gala I had planned start to finish, from the vendor calls to the seating charts. When the night came, Celeste stood under the lights, welcomed the press, and called it her way of giving back. I'd been seated at a side table next to a chafing dish, my name misspelled on the place card. I once thought staying silent made me stronger. That silence was the currency of maturity. But now I understood. It wasn't maturity. It was erasure dressed as grace. My father's voice echoed in the back of my mind. Words he'd spoken on the front porch the day I told him I was marrying into the Hawthorne family. Don't fight for a seat at someone else's table, baby girl. Build your own. But this time I wasn't building a new table. I was walking into the dining hall with the receipt for the original one. When the car pulled up to the dock, I stepped out slowly, heels clicking on concrete. The Charleston wind greeted me like an old friend. I straightened my shoulders and gripped the folder tighter. Ahead, the Halcyon Star glinted under the afternoon sun. On board, they would be sipping champagne, posing for photographs, posting curated captions about legacy. They had no idea I was coming. But that was about to change. The clouds above the Charleston harbor were the color of bruised pewter. The breeze off the water was stiff, carrying salt and tension in equal measure. I wheeled my suitcase toward the gangway of the yacht, each step echoing louder than it needed to. They were already there. The Hawthorns had gathered by the boarding platform, posed for one last photo before departure. Eleanor adjusted her scarf. Jasper was checking his hair and his phone camera. Elliot stood off to the side, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes locked on the planks of the dock. He didn't look up. Celeste saw me first. Her expression froze for a split second, then smoothed into that tight-lipped smile she wore at charity auctions when someone asked a question she didn't like. She stepped forward, blocking my path with the ease of someone who'd done it before. "You really shouldn't be here," she said softly, but not softly enough that others couldn't hear. "Go home, Zinnia. You don't belong here." I didn't answer. I simply pulled out my phone and held up the electronic boarding pass, followed by the thick folder of ownership documents. The dock staff member leaned in, scanned the code, and then glanced down at the printed name. "Ms. Zinnia Fay," he said brightly. "Welcome aboard. Owner access verified." The silence was immediate and thick. A few of the family members stiffened. Jasper cleared his throat. Eleanor looked down at her shoes. Celeste's jaw twitched. Elliot finally lifted his head but said nothing. I walked forward, suitcase rolling behind me. I didn't glance sideways. Didn't pause. But I felt their eyes burn against my back like heat lamps in a cage. Inside the yacht, the scent of teakwood and expensive florals hit me first. The space looked exactly as I remembered because I had chosen the furniture. I had picked the wallpaper. The embroidered pillows that spelled Halcyon in script were custom ordered through a boutique vendor I had sourced myself. This was not their heirloom. That evening, I wandered to the upper deck to get some air. I needed space away from their disapproving silence and clinking forks. That's when I heard Celeste's voice again, this time through my phone. She had gone live on Instagram, parading through the yacht in a silk caftan, narrating the ship's Hawthorne history to her followers. This vessel, she said with a wide smile, was gifted to our family to celebrate generations of excellence and tradition. A crew member walked behind her carrying a folder. Ms. Zinnia, the owner, wanted this delivered to the conference room. Is now okay? The camera shook slightly. Celeste's eyes flickered. Excuse me, she muttered, and the live stream cut off. Too late. By the time I got back to my cabin, the video had already been screen recorded and reposted by multiple followers. Comments flooded in. Wait, Zinnia owns the yacht? Did Celeste lie about it being family property? The buzz moved fast. By the time dessert was served that night, I could feel the shift. Whispers behind wine glasses, phones hidden beneath linen napkins, glances side-eyed and hungry for more gossip. But Celeste didn't confront me directly. She didn't need to. Instead, she whispered to the right people. Later that night, I received a flurry of texts from industry contacts. Hey, just a heads up, Celeste's been saying you used Elliot's money to buy the yacht. She's implying you're leveraging your married status for exposure. She's framing you as an opportunist. And just like that, the tide turned again. Not with shouting, not with slander, with suggestion. That's always been her method. Soft destruction, one subtle doubt at a time. I stood alone on the top deck, Charleston's skyline flickering in the distance. The ocean beneath us was vast, unknowable. So were the days ahead. But unlike before, I wasn't alone in knowing the truth. This time the record had already started to correct itself, and I wasn't going anywhere. The first formal dinner aboard the Halcyon Star felt like an odd mix of theater and trial. Everyone was dressed in silk and pressed collars, doused in cologne and expensive detachment. I wore the same navy dress from the dock. It fit me differently now, less like armor, more like proof I didn't need anyone's permission to exist here. I arrived just on time and took my seat at the main table to the right of Elliot, who offered only a clipped nod. Celeste sat at the head, as she always did, commanding attention with that calculated smile and a glass of vintage red in hand. No one mentioned the live stream or the awkward moment on the upper deck. They acted like nothing had happened. It was their specialty pretend the stain wasn't there even as it spread across the white linen. I recognized the tactic. It was the same one they'd used for years to make me feel small, pretend I wasn't there. Or worse, pretend I was lucky to be. The servers moved quietly, setting down the first course. Lobster bisque in porcelain bowls. I lifted my spoon but didn't eat. Celeste tapped her glass lightly and stood, napkins still folded in her lap. She launched into a speech honey-sweet and deceptively polite about family legacy and the importance of unity over division. She spoke of traditions passed down, of bloodlines that deserve to be protected, of true family built on generations of shared history. Her eyes met mine only once, briefly, like a blade brushing skin. When she finished, the room offered soft applause. I stood before. It faded. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I reached into my leather folder and placed a single sheet of paper on the center of the table, the recording transcript. I believe this line is familiar, I said, and read aloud. She's not blood. Her name shouldn't be tied to family property. The room fell completely silent. Elliot moved like he was about to stand, perhaps to stop me, but I shook my head. He stayed seated. I continued page by page, showing the official purchase records, each wire transfer, each invoice, every document listing me as the sole source of capital behind the Halcyon Star. I handed out printed copies because I knew they would never ask for them. I ended with the original deed signed, stamped and dated. My name might not be Hawthorne by birth, I said, but every cent of this ship came from me. Not your legacy. Not your trust funds. Me. Across the table, Eleanor looked down at her lap, her lips trembling. Clara, Elliot's cousin, met my eyes for a long beat before glancing at Celeste and turning away. Jasper tried to chuckle, probably to diffuse the tension, but the sound died in his throat. Elliot said nothing. His face was unreadable, hollow. Then I saw her Ramona. She was seated at the next table, barely noticeable amid the crystal and candlelight. Her notepad was open. She had been writing everything. She caught my gaze and gave me a subtle nod. I didn't smile back. I didn't need to. Celeste followed my line of sight, and her face stiffened. She knew exactly who Ramona was, and exactly what that nod meant. I didn't wait for dessert. I stepped away from the table, calm heels steady against the teak floor. As I passed the heads of the family, I said only, "This I didn't come here to beg for a seat at your table. I came to remind you, I built the damn thing." I didn't turn around. I thought silence might mean resolution. I should have known better. The next morning, the crew avoided eye contact. The staff at the coffee station handed me my drink without the usual pleasantries. The tension was thick enough to stir with a spoon. Celeste was nowhere in sight until late morning. But her words found me before she did. Maya passed me in the hallway and hesitated. "Just so you know," she said carefully, "Aunt Celeste told the others that the paperwork you showed was fake. She said it was all staged for attention." I let out a short breath through my nose, not a laugh, just disbelief with no room left for shock. Later I overheard a whisper from a crew member. There had been a private meeting in the yacht's conference room that morning. Family only. I wasn't invited, naturally. Celeste had summoned Jasper, a few distant cousins, and surprisingly Henry, the family attorney. She had called the gathering to raise concerns about the authenticity of my documentation and whether I was weaponizing personal assets for professional advantage. In other words, damage control disguised as caution. That evening, I found Elliot alone in our stateroom, scrolling through his phone like nothing was crumbling. "We need to talk," I said, standing in the doorway. He didn't look up. I heard Celeste had a family meeting. About me." He paused, then nodded. "I need to know," I said slowly, "if you've signed anything. Anything that transfers ownership. Anything you didn't read." He flinched, and I had my answer before he spoke. "She said it was a routine document," he said quietly. "A backup copy. A legal safeguard in case something happened to either of us. You signed it." He nodded. "I didn't read it carefully. I trusted her." I held out my hand. "Give me the document." He opened his briefcase and handed me a printed page. I scanned it quickly. It was a signed declaration transferring joint ownership of the Halcyon Star to the Hawthorne Family Trust, naming Celeste as interim trustee. My signature was there too, but it wasn't mine. The penmanship was close, but not mine. I looked at Elliot, who couldn't meet my eyes. He had signed. She had forged. And now they were both complicit, one by intention, the other by cowardice. I remembered all the times he had asked me to let things go. All the dinners where I was seated near the exit while Celeste was toasted. All the times he said, "Don't start anything, Zinnia. Just keep the peace." I understood then what kind of peace he meant. It was the kind where I was expected to swallow injustice quietly, smile through insult, fade in favor of tradition. By midday, the isolation was unmistakable. No one spoke to me directly. Clara avoided my eye. Eleanor offered only a clipped nod and then walked away. Celeste, on the other hand, was visible as ever, floating from group to group, smiling at cameras, posting stories online. In one post, she posed beside a porthole with a caption that read, "Some people confuse presence with power. One is temporary." It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. That afternoon, an article from a fashion gossip blog appeared in my inbox, forwarded by 3 different contacts. The headline read, "Bridal Queen or Boardroom Schemer Allegations Shadow Zinnia Faye's Rise." The article questioned my credibility, hinted at ongoing family disputes, and included anonymous claims that I was leveraging marriage for corporate gain. The photos they used were deliberately unflattering, cropped to suggest isolation, chosen to portray ambition as manipulation. That night I returned to my room and stood in front of the full-length mirror. I slipped back into the navy silk dress and stared at my reflection. How much easier would it be, I whispered, to let them win? My reflection didn't answer, but I knew the truth. It wouldn't be peace. It would be extinction. And I hadn't come this far to disappear. I stepped onto the deck just after midnight. No one followed. No one even noticed I had left. The air was sharp, salt-laced and bitter. I curled my knees to my chest on the cold iron bench, the hem of my navy silk dress brushing against the floorboards. My arms wrapped around myself not out of cold, but to hold something inside that was threatening to spill. I didn't cry, not right away. I stared into the black stretch of sea, breathing through my teeth, jaw clenched tight. I blinked furiously until the silence finally allowed the shaking to begin in my hands, and the tears followed with no ceremony. I didn't sob. The tears simply fell steady and slow like the tide rolling in. I remembered my father's voice. No one will offer you a seat, Zinnia. You'll have to build one from the wood on your own back. Back then, I thought he meant hard work. Now I understood he meant wounds. Every splinter, every betrayal, every silence I'd endured had been a part of the cost. I pulled out my phone, needing something to ground me. I checked my email, hoping for something, anything to distract. There it was. A message from the Avian Group, our largest investor. My chest tightened as I opened it. We are concerned about ongoing brand perception issues. If reputational risk is not mitigated within 7 days, we will be suspending our active capital support indefinitely. I nearly dropped the phone. Years. Years of pitching building bleeding for my bridal line, and it was all teetering because one woman was determined to erase me to protect a lie. And now she wasn't just smearing my name, she was about to kill everything I had built. I gripped the rail, fighting the urge to scream into the night. And then I remembered Ramona. I dialed her numbers with shaking fingers. She picked up before the first ring finished. Zinnia. Her voice was tight, furious. I've got everything. Every file, every email, every timestamp. What do you want to do? I was silent for a moment. Then I answered. Write it. Everything. Let the truth speak for itself. No drama, no revenge, just facts. There was a pause. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. It's time to flip the damn boat. I ended the call, returned to my room, and placed the folder of ownership documents back in my bag. Then I opened a different folder. It had been gathering dust in the bottom drawer of my desk for 3 years. Crisis Media Response Plan, the label read. I had written it back when I was still new in the fashion world, just in case a scandal ever found me. Now it wasn't just finding me, it was knocking on the door. By sunrise, the story was live. Ramona's article dropped like a thunderclap. Headline, She's Not Blood, but She Owns the Ship. The exposé was meticulous, methodical. It outlined every manipulation, every deleted email, every doctored file. The audio recordings were included, screenshots of Celeste's email canceling my room reservation, the forged document with my falsified signature, and most importantly, a full scan of the official ownership title of the Halcyon Star, my name stamped, sealed, and irrefutable. Within hours, the article was shared across every social media platform. The hashtag #ZinniaOwns. It began trending globally. People didn't just read the piece, they dissected it. They shared their own stories of being cast aside, of being silenced. My inbox flooded with messages from strangers, designers, artists, women who had sat at the edge of someone else's table too long. The first fracture came from Jasper. He confronted Celeste in the dining salon before brunch. I wasn't there, but Clara told me later. Did you forge that signature, Celeste? He asked plainly. She didn't deny it. She just walked out. By noon, I received emails from Clara Henry and 3 other relatives who had kept their distance. Clara's message was short. I'm sorry. We believed the wrong person. And then came a knock at my door. Eleanor stood there, her eyes swollen, mascara faintly smudged. Zinnia, she whispered. I was wrong. I was. I let her convince me you were an outsider because it was easier than confronting how little we knew. I'm sorry. Truly. I didn't hug her. I just nodded. And that was enough. An hour later, Elliot sent a single message. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if you need anything, I'm still here. He didn't sign it. He didn't have to. That afternoon, Celeste tried to regain control. She went live. Tears streamed down her cheeks, perfectly timed. I've been set up by someone who wanted to destroy my family, she said. I was only trying to protect what's rightfully ours. Blood matters, it always has. But the internet didn't bite. The comment section filled with users quoting receipts from Ramona's article. Clips from the earlier livestream surfaced, specifically the moment when a staff member referred to me as the owner. Someone uploaded a side-by-side breakdown of her false statements overlaid with timestamps and source links. Her livestream ended not in applause, but in chaos. Voices shouting, screenshots pouring in. The narrative had unraveled. That evening, I called for a formal meeting in the Yacht's main salon. She arrived in white, as if purity could still be performed. I didn't stand when she entered. I didn't smile. In front of Eleanor, Jasper, and Henry, I placed the original signed contract on the table. This confirms sole ownership under my name. What I need now is not an apology. Just your signature stating that you waive any and all claims to this vessel. She stared at it. The color drained from her face. But she signed. She had no choice. I picked up the document and slid it back into its sleeve. I never stayed silent because I was weak. I stayed silent because I thought dignity was louder. But now I know truth needs a voice. Henry cleared his throat. There's also the matter of forgery, he said. What you did, Celeste. It's grounds for prosecution. We can discuss it in more detail. No need, I interrupted. I'm not pressing charges. But she will post a public apology, one verified by a legal team. Full acknowledgement, no dodging, no edits. By sunset, her post was live. It was stiff, carefully worded, and devoid of warmth. But it was public, and it was real. I didn't celebrate. I went back to the deck, looked out at the horizon, and breathed. This wasn't a victory, it was a reclamation. Elliot came to me the next morning. He wasn't holding flowers or excuses or the usual soft-spoken phrases designed to smooth things over. He stood in the doorway of my suite and said simply, I let others decide whether you belonged in a space you built with your own hands. That was cowardly. I was wrong. And I need to fix it, not with words but with action. I let him speak. I didn't interrupt, didn't reassure. For the first time, he didn't shrink from the silence. That same afternoon, Elliot met with Henry and signed a formal revocation of the forged transfer. He submitted legal documentation confirming the invalidity of the fake trust deed Celeste had presented. In addition, he transferred full authority of all onboard assets, including financial staffing and long-term use of the Halcyon Star, into my name unconditionally. It was the first time I saw him risk upsetting his family to stand beside his wife. I didn't thank him, not because I wasn't grateful, but because I knew this wasn't a favor. It was overdue accountability. News of Ramona's article had traveled far beyond the yacht. Women across industries began sharing their own stories, designers, entrepreneurs, students. The hashtag had Zinnia Owns. It grew into a movement. Interviews were requested, panels formed. A boutique PR firm reached out to collaborate on a series about legacy and erasure in creative spaces. Avian reinstated our funding. Within a week, a European venture fund proposed a multi-market expansion plan. What had nearly destroyed my business had become the very reason it now flourished, and I was ready. I scheduled a meeting aboard the Halcyon Star. For once, I was the one calling the gathering not to defend myself, but to define the future. In the conference room, under the soft hum of ceiling lights, I stood at the head of the table and announced the new terms. All access to this vessel must now be granted through written approval. This is no longer a symbolic space for legacy. It's a working platform for respect and innovation, and respect is not inherited, it's earned. I invited Eleanor, Clara, and a few others who had shown me honesty. I did not invite Celeste. She no longer belonged to the future we were shaping. Later that night, I received an email from Maya. Subject: application for mentorship. She had attached her portfolio, raw, imperfect, brimming with potential. In her letter, she wrote, "I don't want to grow into the shape of the generation before me. I want to be seen. I want to stand on my own." I read every word twice. Then I replied, "Accepted." It wasn't out of obligation. It wasn't to prove a point. It was because I saw in her what I once needed someone to see in me. When I returned to Charleston, the city was golden with spring. I unlocked the studio door. Sunlight spilled across bolts of fabric, and the faint scent of jasmine from the courtyard drifted in. On the wall, I rehung the old frame, the one with my father's words, "Don't fight for a seat, build the damn table." And for the first time, I understood it wasn't just about power. It was about dignity. 2 weeks later, I hosted a small dinner at the house on Lawrence Street. It wasn't grand. I didn't want opulence, I wanted home. The guest list was short: Ramona, of course, Eleanor and Clara, Maya, a few young women from the new mentorship program. No cameras, no hashtags, just cornbread, pan-fried catfish, summer slaw, and sweet peach tea. The dining room glowed in amber light. Each plate was set with care. Every guest had a name card handwritten by me. No one was forgotten. No one was cropped out of the picture. After the second course, Eleanor stood. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her glass. I used to think survival meant staying quiet. That harmony was more important than truth. But Zinnia, you reminded me that silence can be its own violence. Thank you for not giving up, not on Elliot, not on this family, but most of all, not on yourself. She looked at me with eyes that had once been cautious but were now open. Thank you, my daughter. My throat tightened. I nodded, not because I needed her approval anymore, but because I recognized what it cost her to say it. Celeste's name never came up that night. I'd heard she left Charleston quietly, lost her brand endorsements. Her speaking engagements dried up. She'd taken a house somewhere on the coast, far from the spotlight she once demanded. I didn't speak of her not out of forgiveness, but because she no longer occupied any space in my story. Sometimes, silence is the final sentence. In May, I launched my new bridal collection. It was called Own Your Place. There were no flowers in the designs, just clean white lines, silver threadwork stitched across bodices like scars that had been mended deliberately by hand. Critics called it haunting, raw. One wrote, "There are no florals in this collection," but I cried anyway. Every dollar of profit from the first month went into establishing the Halcyon Fund, a scholarship foundation supporting young women entering creative industries with no legacy behind them, only determination. The final scene, I stood alone on the deck of the Halcyon Star at sunset, overlooking the harbor lights of Charleston. I wore a soft white dress, not designed for weddings, but for walking into rooms I once wasn't allowed to enter. In my hand was a ceramic coffee cup, the same one with the hairline crack I'd kept since the first design pitch that was ever laughed out of a boardroom. The breeze moved gently. No one turned away when I walked past anymore. But that wasn't the point. I didn't need to be seen to belong. I had built the table. And now I sat at it on my own, with no one's borrowed chair beneath me. Sometimes the tables we're kept from are the ones we're meant to build ourselves. And when we do not out of spite but from strength, no one can take our place again. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, tell me where you're watching from, or simply say, "Here," and if you haven't yet hit subscribe. Your presence here matters more than you know.